March 22, 1914. O Lord, Divine Master of love, enlighten their consciousness and their hearts. They have made an effort to reach out towards Thee, but because of their ignorance, their prayers probably did not rise to Thee, and their false conceptions have barred the way to their aspiration. Yet, in Thy mercy, Thou dost turn all goodwill to account, and a flash of sincerity is enough for Thy divine light to use it to illumine the intelligence, for Thy sublime love to penetrate into all hearts and fill them with that pure and lofty benevolence, which is one of the best expressions of Thy law. What I willed for them, with Thy will, in moments when I could be in true communion with Thee, grant that they may have received it on the day when, striving to forget all outer contingencies, they turned to their noblest thought, their best feelings. May the supreme serenity of Thy sublime presence awake in them. March 23, 1914. As I see it, the ideal state is that in which, constantly conscious with Thy consciousness, one knows at every moment, spontaneously, without any reflection being necessary, exactly what should be done to best express Thy law. That state I know, for I have experienced it at certain moments. But very often, the knowledge of the how is veiled by a mist of ignorance, and one must call in reflection, which is not always a good counselor, let alone all that one does at every instant without having any time for reflection, on the spur of the moment. How far does it confirm with or oppose Thy law? That depends upon the state of the subconscient, on what is active in it at that time. Once the deed is done, if it has any importance, if one can look at it, analyze it, understand it, it serves as a lesson, enables one to become aware of one's motive of action, and hence of something in the subconscient which still governs the being and has to be mastered. Every action on earth is bound to have a good and a bad side. Even the actions which best express the most divine law of love carry in them something of the disorder and darkness inherent in the world as it is today. Some people, those who are called pessimists, perceive almost exclusively the dark side of everything. The optimists, on the other hand, see only the side of beauty and harmony. And if it is foolish and ignorant to be an unwitting optimist, is it not making a happy conquest to become a willing optimist. In the eyes of pessimists, whatever one does will always be bad, ignorant, or egoistic. How could one satisfy them? It is an impossible task. There is only one recourse: to unite as perfectly as possible with the highest and purest light that one can conceive, to identify one's consciousness as completely as possible with the Absolute Consciousness, to strive to receive all inspirations from that consciousness alone, so as to foster as best one can its manifestation upon earth, and trusting in its power to regard all events with serenity. Since everything is necessarily mixed in the present manifestation, the wisest thing is to do one's best, striving towards an ever higher light, and to resign oneself to the fact that absolute perfection is for the moment unrealizable. And yet, how ardently must we always aspire for that inaccessible perfection. March 24, 1914. The result of all my reflections of yesterday is the finding that the only disturbance I experience comes from my fear of not having been or of not being perfectly identified with Thy law. And this disturbance comes precisely from the fact that the identification is not complete. For if it were, I could not ask myself whether it is so, and on the other hand, as I know from experience, all disturbance would become impossible for me. But in face of an error or blunder, the true thought to have is not to say to oneself, I should have done better, I should have done this instead of that, but rather, I was not sufficiently identified with the eternal consciousness. I must strive to realize better this definitive and integral union. Yesterday afternoon, during those long hours of silent contemplation, I understood at last what is meant by true identification with the object of one's thought. I touched this realization, as it were, not by achieving a mental state, but simply through steadiness and control of thought. I understood that I would need long, very long hours of contemplation to be able to perfect this realization. This is one of the things I expect from the journey to India, if indeed Thou dost consider it useful for Thy service, Lord. My progress is slow, very slow, but I hope that in compensation it may be lasting and free from all fluctuation. Grant that I may accomplish my mission, that I may help in thy integral manifestation. March 25, 1914. Translation by Sri Aurobindo. Silent and unseen as always, but all-powerful, thy action has made itself felt, and in these souls that seemed to be so closed, a perception of thy divine light is awake. I knew well that none could invoke thy presence in vain, and if in the sincerity of our hearts we commune with thee through no matter what organism, body, or human collectivity, this organism, in spite of its ignorance, finds its unconsciousness wholly transformed. But when in one or several elements there is the conscious transformation, when the flame that smoulders under the ashes leaps out suddenly, illumining all the being, then with joy we salute thy sovereign action. Testify once more to thy invincible puissance, and can hope that a new possibility of true happiness has been added to the others in mankind. O Lord, an ardent thanksgiving mounts from me towards thee, expressing the gratitude of this sorrowing humanity which thou illuminest, transformest, and glorifiest, and givest to it the peace of knowledge. March 28, 1914. From the time we started, and every day more and more, in all things we can see thy divine intervention. Everywhere thy law is expressed, and I need all my inner conviction to feel that this is perfectly natural, so that I do not pass from wonder to wonder. At no moment do I feel that I am living outside thee, and never have the horizons appeared vaster to me, and the depths at once more luminous and unfathomable. Grant, O divine teacher, that we may know and accomplish our mission upon earth better and better, more and more, that we may make full use of all the energies that are in us, and thy sovereign presence become manifest ever more perfectly in the silent depths of our soul, and all our thoughts, all our feelings, all our actions. I find it almost strange to speak to thee. So much is it thou who livest in me, thinkest and lovest.